Hello and welcome to day 2 of the Fall 2025 Web Development Technologies course. I'm Jim Coppin and I'll be your instructor. So today what I want to go ahead and just do a quick chapter 1 review, just highlight a few things, and then we're going to go ahead and do the chapter 1 written test as a group. And so all you need to do is watch this part of the video and you'll be able to do the written test. And then I just want to kind of do a walkthrough of your repository, GitHub Desktop. And, for me, I kind of create a shortcut folder so I can access different things quickly. I want to go ahead and go through Visual Studio Code a little bit, show you some things, some settings and so forth. And then I'm going to go ahead and do some of the chapter 1 assignments as well. And then I'll lecture over chapter 2. So as far as chapter 1 review, just some general concepts. The internet and the web. The internet is the largest network, while the World Wide Web is a collection of billions of web pages. So always think of a web being web pages, because there is things on the internet. The internet is not equal to the web, right? The web's kind of on the internet, right? It's part of the internet, but there's actually other things that are used. For the web, we always talk about the hypertext transfer protocol, the HTTP. If you ever in your browser, if you click up in that browser address bar, sometimes you'll see that HTTP or HTTPS at the very front of that URL. Well, that's because it's using HTTPS protocol. And that protocol is those rules, those rules for how a client talks to a server. It's a specification that, like when they create browsers, Google, Microsoft, other companies have created browsers, they have to build that browser with that protocol in mind, right? They have to follow those rules. And so back to that, so there's other protocols, so like an FTP protocol, there's other protocols that are related to the internet that's not really web related, okay? So always think of the web being the HTTP protocol, and you're seeing web pages, where the internet's a little more encompassing. It's a little more than just that, okay? Internet service providers. So internet service providers are one to basically provide access. So most of different ones, especially in our area, it's like Charter, which is Spectrum, AT&T. There are a bunch of fiber companies nowadays. That's grown over time. Used to be just really AT&T and then Spectrum, but that's grown considerably to many other different companies as well. We did talk about networks a little bit, and there's different kinds of networks. So the second point here, protocols and browsers. We already talked about HTTP, and the version that's the secure version is HTTPS. And nowadays, really a lot of browsers will. Firefox is a little more forgiving, but Chrome will, if you try to access HTTP, it usually will give you a warning that this is not a secure website. Okay. So that HTTPS adds another layer of security to the HTTP protocol. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol, and that's all about transferring files from, say, from your client machine to a server. And back in the day, there's easier ways to do this nowadays. Things have changed over time, but originally on the early days of the internet, if you created a web page, you'd have, let's say you were a developer and, it was your job to create web pages and deploy them, out to the, in production so that, the public could see that. And if that was, your job, usually you had to get those files to that server. And, there's better ways nowadays, but, back then they used to have like a FTP little client that you ran, that you would click some buttons. It would take files from your local directory, and it would send them out to the server. Okay, So that's what FTP is. Also, this chapter one talks a lot about planning a website. You know what's important. Purpose and audience. Who's your audience? Who's your target audience? What's the purpose of creating this website? Responsive design. So how's your users going to be accessing this? That's really important to know. Early on. Because you nowadays you pretty much you should, and there's a lot of frameworks and libraries that make it a lot easier to build things for all of the um, uh, different types of clients. But there might be some situations where it's a very complex thing where you've got this big dashboard and you've got a lot of interaction that may not just really work well on a phone or something, and maybe design more for a desktop computer, desktop or laptop, and maybe your user base is some professional that's working in an office, and if that's who if that's your target audience, then you're going to design things a little differently, right? If you're building an app that you want to that's to the general public, that they may use any kind of device, well, then you're going to build things maybe a little differently, right? So it's important to really know, who your target audience is in that circumstances. Wireframes and sitemaps. So you use a wireframe as a visual guide just to show how you're going to create things, what your website's going to look like. Now, wireframe can take there's actually tools to do wireframes, but a wireframe can be just you take a piece of paper and you draw that out on a piece of paper, right? And if there's some assignments here where you need to be using wireframes, you can basically do that, take a picture of it and upload it to your repository. That's fine. But there's other options as well. There's tools available, which we'll introduce you to that later. And we also talked about sitemap, and the sitemap is kind of it's a plan for your website structure. And back in the day, they used to be a lot easier to find, and I guess maybe they're not. I don't know the purpose of it being hidden more, but a lot of sites you usually always go homepage, go all the way to the bottom. They usually had a links on sitemap, and it kind of showed all of the different sections, all the different areas. And all the different places you can go within that website, and that's considered a sitemap, right? Talk about layouts. So there's kind of a linear, a hierarchical, or webbed type layouts. HTML fundamentals. So kind of reviewed, talked a little bit about HTML being a markup language. Another markup language would be like XML. I don't know if it's mentioned in that. XML is another markup language, but HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's used to create the structure of a web page. It defines the basic components, including tags, elements, and attributes. And this chapter also covered the basic structure, such as like the head section, the body section, etc. We talked about like P tags, paragraph tags, and BR for break. So there's those tags that are not open tags; they're closed tags, where a line break is just a bracket, a start bracket, BR, and an end bracket, right? And that's a line break. It doesn't have any attributes. It doesn't have any content, right? Other tags have content, have other things inside of them, right? Body tags have something in there. A paragraph tag, a P tag, it's going to have content in there, right? Other web languages. So besides just HTML's a markup language, we also have cascading style sheets, which we're going to be doing. We'll be starting that very soon, as early as chapter 4. We'll be doing a lot of cascading style sheets, and that's for styling it. Giving color, all kinds of different things you can do. Basically making it look a lot more, prettier, or aesthetically pleasing, so to speak, right? And then, so besides those technologies, JavaScript is also a very widely used client-side technology, and we will be getting into that kind of actually towards the end of this book. But we also will have a JavaScript book, a separate book. That's the second half of this course, and we'll be doing a lot of JavaScript then. And then there's other languages such as PHP and ASP. We're not going to be using them, but just making you aware that there's other languages as well. And those run on the server, okay? Web authoring tools. So there's a difference between a simple text editor and then, what you see is what you get. Called WYSIWYG. And simple text editors like Notepad, using Visual Studio Code. That's basically a text editor as well for the most part. WYSIWYG is really where you can grab things and move things around on a page. And usually, WYSIWYGs are very good for when for people that maybe don't know how to code, right? Don't understand coding. People who understand coding can use the editors. Where somebody who don't, there's other tools, and very popular one is Dreamweaver. That way you can move things around on the page, and behind the scenes it's actually creating the code, right? It's just a tool that basically creates the code from what you put on the screen, right? All right, so just a quick run through on that. So next I want to go ahead and do the written test here. Okay, so first you just want to kind of come into the main page and then go to the coursework page. On the coursework page, it kind of has what's due next. And then what's due next, you may not want to be, like in this case, we have multiple things due on the 31st. You don't always necessarily have to do things in order. I do think that there is some benefit in, actually a lot of benefit, first kind of getting familiar with that chapter, reading that chapter a little bit, understanding those concepts, then doing that written test. And then after that, go ahead and do your coding after that. It's, some students, don't really want to do the written tests and stuff, and really don't want to do the reading either, or, go through the chapters, just like to code and just want to kind of start jumping and doing code. But, there's a lot of benefit to kind of getting some of those basics down. It's in the chapter, do that written test, and then from there you can go ahead and start doing your coding, right? But that's your option. But down here, so we've got the most everyone already done the questionnaire. Will be closing tomorrow at 11:30. And then here's the assignments. And actually, there's 2 more assignments I need to add, and I will be adding those later today. So the very first one, here's the written test, okay? And so we're going to go ahead and click on that. And then you want to come in here. I was already playing around with mine, so that's why mine says resume. But you're going to want to go ahead and start that test. So we're going to come in here, and this is what it should look like for you. And so we're just going to go ahead and go through all of these. And so if you follow what I put in there, hopefully you get a pretty decent score. I could miss something. And sometimes I do want to warn you that some of these questions are, well, sometimes they're not worded very well and can kind of, and sometimes they have the wrong answers, to be honest with you. So let's go ahead and start here at the first one. All right. So a term used to describe the ever-growing number of devices connected to a network, including television and appliances. So the World Wide Web, we know that's really about HTML documents and everything. This is really talking about connected devices connected. All right. So the answer that's best is really the first one, Internet of Things. It's just a term that someone came up with some years ago to define the idea of a number of devices connected to a network. Internet backbone, that's pretty much the whole internet. Domain name server, which is DNS. And domain server is basically when you put a name into a browser, or when you click a link, it doesn't matter. Any kind of a domain name like ESPN.com, right? Say ESPN.com, and then you hit enter, and then it goes, and what it does, it goes to a domain name server, and it takes that name and that converts that into a IP address, and that IP address is associated with a specific server, so it knows how to map that name to a certain server, and that's what that's all about. So we're going to go ahead and choose Internet of Things. The world's largest network is and here is pretty much the internet, right? We also talked about it intranet, and intranet is kind of a private network, right? A private network, usually for like an example is maybe some large company campus has maybe 15 buildings on this headquarters thing. They've got everything connected together, so all the employees can access different things within that intranet. Okay, it's not available out to the general public, right? Then an extranet's kind of a different scenario where you've got, and not to say that the intranet doesn't necessarily run on top of the internet, but you don't have access. You can't search for it, and there's that web page for that, and right? It's kind of done a little differently, okay? And then an extranet's kind of the same thing, but it's for outside company. Well, an example I think I gave before is, let's say that you are a supplier of widgets. You create widgets, and you have certain companies that buy your widgets for you that they use. So you may have an extranet site is for them to go in there and order things and that. And it may not, and it won't be necessarily available. It may have some other special functionality in there that you really don't want to share with other people. So you have what's called an extranet site, and only that group of people can actually access that. Okay. Is any device such as a computer, tablet, or smartphone connected to an internet? Okay, it's not a data packet. It's not a resource locator. It's not a wireframe. It's a node. A node is any device, computer, anything. All right. The page of a website typically provides information about the website's purpose and content, often by including a list of links or other web pages on the site. I think that should be pretty obvious that that's be your home page, right? Wouldn't be tables or tools or a server. It's the home page, your home page of your website. Number 5, a host computer that stores resources and files for websites. Okay, so we've talked about that before. You've got your client and you got your server. Your client is like your browser, right? Your browser's the client, and then there's some computers that are somewhere else, right? There are special kind of computers that are basically servers, right? But they have a lot of similar hardware specifications that your computer. They're different, they have different specifications, but they have some of the same things there. But the whole purpose of the server is to serve up content, right, or serve up something. So that's where you store the resources and files for websites. It's on a server. A set of rules that define how a client workstation can communicate with the server. We're talking about that HTTPS, right? HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, right? That word protocol. A set of rules for exchanging text, graphics, sound, video, and other multimedia files on the web. Okay. Graphics, sound, all there on the web. Okay, that's going to be our Hypertext Transfer Protocol. That's how we exchange pages, graphics, sound, video, all that over the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Okay, this is an example of this is we are talking about earlier. You know, when you type a name of a website, hit enter the name, it gets converted to the domain name server is going to convert that into an IP address, right? And an IP address is an internet protocol address. Okay, IP address is an example. All right. The blank was created to resolve the difficulty in remembering and using internet protocol addresses to access websites. And we just kind of mentioned this already 2 times. So it's the domain name server, right? Otherwise, without a domain name server, you'd have to know the exact IP address to access that website. Okay. In order to view a web page on any type of website, a device needs to have what installed? Well, in this day and age, maybe things will change in the future, but to view a web page, every web page, even if it's on a phone, a tablet, a laptop, computer, whatever, you need to have a browser. Right? A private network that uses internet technologies to share company information among employees. Kind of talked about that already a little bit earlier, and that is called an intranet. The address of a document or a file accessible on the internet. Okay, an address of a document or a file accessible on the internet is a Uniform Resource Locator, a URL. Okay, URL. You know, sometimes we think, just kind of want to mention this, we think of a document, when we're looking at a web page. Well, a web page is a document. Sometimes it's hard to think, okay, a web page, sometimes you think of a document as a Word document, some other kind of document, that you'd bring up on your computer, right? That you might have stored on your computer. But, an HTML file is a document, right? So just kind of wanted to point that out. Okay. Number 13 here, an example of a present in the browser. Okay, what is that? And once again, is also Uniform Resource Locator, URL. All right, number 14. Instructors use a blank to communicate announcement, post questions, reading material, list contact information, and provide access to lecture slides and videos. Not that we necessarily do it all like that, but it's basically talking about instructors, talking about within an educational system. Educational systems generally use what's called LMSs, which are learning management systems. Okay, a private network that uses internet technologies to share business information with selected corporate partners or key customers. This is where I talked about it earlier with the widget thing. We have these external companies, right? But it's still a private network, and that is an extranet. Number 16, allows developers to create one website that provides optimal viewing experience across a range of devices. So this here is pretty much what a lot of this book's about, is about responsive design. We talked about, especially these chapters, talked a lot about responsive design, right? So responsive design, so websites you can view across multiple different devices. A simple visual guide that clearly identifies the location of the main web page elements, such as navigation area. So it's a visual guide that kind of identifies all this, shows what it looks like, right? And that is a wireframe. Number 18, hypertext markup language combines tags and descriptive attributes to define how a document should appear in a web browser. So the answer here is true. The mission of jQuery. So this one here, and I'm fine with whatever you choose because I kind of looked at this one earlier. And the mission of jQuery is to drive a broad adoption and ongoing development. So actually, let me go. Let's just search this one because I am very. That is, from my perspective, that is not the right answer. Because it's really going to refer to other things. The broad adoption of ongoing is strong community support and continuously from the EMC standards and that open source foundation, right? So these are these standards and this foundation that kind of drive those kinds of things. It's not really jQuery. jQuery's is a library, right? So I really think that is wrong there. And I'm going to say false, but I think that is going to, I think, because I actually took this before just to see if everything was working correctly, and I know that this flagged this, I put false, because I don't think that's it. Derive broad adoption of ongoing development of key solutions and related technologies. jQuery doesn't, it basically just is kind of a library to make things easier. It's not really to do with other related technologies. And to drive broad adoption. No, that's the wrong one. But if no matter what you get on that, I'm going to switch those. So if you do true or false on that, I'll make sure you get credit. It won't probably be until like next Monday. But okay, a text editor allows dragging HTML elements onto a page while coding. No, it does not. That's a WYSIWYG. So this would be false. Okay, and I'm just go ahead and submit this. See what we got, and we probably should got one wrong at least. Turn in, you have to make sure you turn it in. And 18 out of 20. So let me go take a look. So as a student, you're not going to be able to see right now until it's past the due date of the answers. But I, as an instructor, can go look at that. I need to change this. I'm just going to go kind of go take a look real quick. Here, let me actually move this out of the way. I don't want to accidentally show some other students' grades and stuff. So I got 2 wrong there. Okay, so you'll be able to see these later, but just the way it works. Oh, let's see which one I did wrong here. I know it was that last one here. Oh, a private network that uses internet technology to share business info with selected corporate things. The next one is a private network that uses internet to share. Why? Okay, no, that one was right. Right? Let's see. Am I looking at the wrong things here? So this one was wrong, and this one was the one I'm saying that actually I believe this is not true. Okay, so actually I'm going to give you points no matter what. So that was that one. I don't. What am I missing here? Did I not? Maybe I didn't enter this at all or something. I don't know. I don't see my other X here. That's kind of interesting. Huh. All right. So I really think that this was the only one I got wrong here, but all right. Okay, so that's that. So that's how you basically do a written test. Okay, so now I want to kind of talk about your GitHub repository. I'm not sure that we really need to talk about this, but I do create like a shortcut. I can show you how to create a shortcut real quick, and if you don't know how to do that. But repository in GitHub Desktop. So I want to kind of go through that a little bit here. All right. So if you followed the kind of the directions on setting up the classroom and GitHub and everything, if you bring up GitHub Desktop, you should see the your repository that you have. Okay, ignore I have a bunch of repositories, so kind of ignore that. But if you come in here and say, let's get started, and you don't have anything here, you should have if you followed everything, you should already have the repository. But just in case you don't, I'm going to kind of show you how to to get your repository that you have on GitHub and bring that in locally, okay? And you can do that by cloning a repository, right? So we're going to hit this clone a repository from the internet, okay? And so then if you go to, and if you don't know how to get to this either, for some reason, if you know how to get to yours, when you joined the classroom and did that, I have access to where yours is. So if for some reason you're confused about this, so this is your GitHub repository, right? That's on this is for the course, and this is what you need to make sure that you're going to end up changing files locally. You're going to use GitHub Desktop to push those files, commit those files to this GitHub repository, okay? And when you put comments, you'll see certain comments of things being checked in, okay? So when I check your whole code, all your coding assignments are pretty much going to be in GitHub in this repository, okay? The other things we're going to do, like the written test, that's all done inside Rankin, but pretty much all your coding stuff is going to be done in GitHub, in this GitHub repository, okay? And so what I do is, and most of the time there'll be some things that might be due Wednesday, by midnight, 11:30, whatever. But at the end of Wednesday, but many of things are going to be due kind of by Sunday, at the end of the day, Sunday. And so what I do is basically Monday morning, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab everybody's code. I'm going to grab everybody what's in their repository. So if you don't have something in your repository, or you didn't do a written test or that, you're going to be marked as absent, right? But besides that, if you don't have it committed in time, and if you forgot to accidentally, I forgot to commit it, right? Well, you're going to have to incur a 10% late deduction from your assignment, right? So it has to be in here. Just because you did something locally, it's not in here until you push it here. And you should always kind of get in the habit of checking to make sure that things got pushed out here, right? But the way you get things here, and there's not only one way, but the way that's pretty much the simplest is using that GitHub Desktop. So that's going to push things out here, right? So let's real quick, while we're here, let's look what's in here. So we've got a final has nothing in here. And the reason for this, just want to mention, anytime in GitHub, and this is a good tip for you as well, anytime you create a folder, if you don't have anything in there, right, when you create this stuff locally, and try to push new folders out here, if you don't have anything in that folder, it's not going to push that. It's not going to put that folder out there. It only pushes folders out there that have something in it. And so when we don't have anything in it, you have to put something. So that's why I have these temp.txt. This is a placeholder, but you can ignore this file, right? So you'll see that in some of these directory structures. Okay. Then we also have the midterm one. It's pretty much the same as the final. We'll worry about that obviously later. And then this is where the core of your stuff's going to be. Now, I originally, this was kind of the first time we're using this book and stuff. So they do have these data files. Originally, I was creating these, this labs directory. Well, not the labs directory, but the exercises, where you got all these chapters. I'm thinking maybe we'll just go ahead and do everything in the data files. And when I'm saying not everything, everything but the labs. So you've got your chapter 1, all right? You can do your analyze, your apply, your extend, as you'll see these when you see your assignments. And just go ahead and do them right here in your data files directory, okay? Just do it. Make your changes in this data files directory. Okay, so for right now, for stuff that we're going to be doing, use your data files directory for those assignments. Okay, but then also we have a couple labs that is basically things that one chapter builds on the other, right? So what you're going to do is use the same directory for Strike a Chord and Wild Rescue. Okay, these are the two labs that throughout this whole book, we're going to be just adding to that lab, adding functionality as we go, right? You don't want to check in lab one play, the chapter 1 lab 1, and then the chapter lab 2 somewhere else. You really want to just do it all in one directory, so you're building upon that all throughout this book, okay? So this is where you're going to put your labs. I'll send an email just to make sure everybody understands where to put things. And like I said, make sure you go ahead and use your data files for all of the other assignments, except for we'll also have homework and hands-on test. So the only one that we're going to kind of be skipping here, then I guess, is the exercise one. Just we're not going to be using that. Okay. So get very familiar with the data files one, okay? Get very familiar with that data files directory. What else did I want to add here? All right, I don't know. So that's how that's laid out, right? So back to where we were. Let's go back to this page. So in here, for some reason, if you need to clone your repository again, okay? Obviously, if you use the setting up your environment and kind of follow that, you should see that in GitHub Desktop. That should be there, right? And then actually you should have a local version as well that if you follow the directions, right? If for some reason something didn't work out well and you need to clone your directory structure, you can come in here under HTTPS. You've got this one, copy this, okay? And then come back to GitHub Desktop. And we're going to click here, clone a repository, click URL. Put this in here. And let me just check real quick to make sure that what I have in that directory already. Bear with me for a second. So here I'm just going to create a new folder and call that like coursework here. And this can be wherever you want. I wouldn't make sure that you have access to this. You don't want to do it on this one is actually where you've got a, let me click in here. So you really kind of want to be in your users folder and stuff like that. If you try to store, if you try to put in some Windows type thing, you may have problems because you're not an admin, you have permissions issues, right? So you kind of want to have, make sure you do this and something that you have access to. But here I'm just creating this one called coursework, okay? And I'm going to come up here. This is how I kind of copy things. Come up here and just copy that. What did I do there? I don't know what I did. Got a little carried away there. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the path. And obviously, like I said, if you follow directions, you already have your repository. You don't have to worry about any of this, okay? But it's going to go ahead and clone this within this repository. within this directory structure. Okay, and what you're going to want to do on this one is you want to choose for my own purposes. You don't want to contribute to the parent product, only for your own purposes. Okay, only your own repository. Hit continue, and now you're good. Now you have this repository, and so if you come in here, you can always, especially let's say this happens sometimes. So somebody gets confused about where they have some things as far they're on their local machine. If you have this already in GitHub Desktop, you can always come in and click Show in Explorer, and it's going to go directly to where that is. Okay, it's always going to go where that is. And another thing you can always do here, if you forget, once you have your repository in here, like where's my GitHub account out there on the internet, you can click View there, and it's going to go directly to there as well. Okay. So that's that. Let me think if there's anything in here. There's going to be some times, especially later on. So when I set this directory structure up, that's in the GitHub, is really just for this book. Do have that final and the midterm, but besides that, it's really just for the HTML portion of the book. Well, we're going to be doing some stuff for the JavaScript later. So we're going to end up having to do later is I'm going to end up having to push a bunch of stuff out to your front for the other book later on when we get closer to the end of the HTML book. I'm gonna have to push a bunch of stuff, and you'll have to come up here and click like fetch origin so that it will go ahead and grab all that stuff. Okay, we'll worry about that later. Okay, but don't mess with too many things here. You don't just keep things just like they are. Main branch. Kind of need to be a little careful about some things. So let's go ahead and show this in Explorer, and I'm going to talk about a couple things here. So here you've got this .git, and see how this, and you might not be seeing this. It all depends on your settings. So here, if I go ahead and choose, am I in the right one? Properties? No. I think I'm actually, no. I think I actually can get to there. But right here, show. So I'm showing hidden files. Probably maybe by default most of the time you may not have that, and it doesn't matter. I'm just showing you this there for your own knowledge. Okay, one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to ever change anything in there. Okay, so this .git, and what this does is this, you did your install of Git right on your machine. And we're not talking about GitHub, we're talking about that Git. When we downloaded that Git, that's basically your version control, right? GitHub's just a website where you can commit Git repositories, right? It's a place, right? And it's great because what if something happens to your computer? Then you still have all your stuff if you're committing your files, right? But this Git here is actually going to track everything that you do. Any changes you make, it's tracking changes, okay? Every time you make a change, right? And I'm going to show you this in a little bit here. Every time you make a change, you'll actually see something in here. You make just one little change to a file, even just put a space in there and save that file. You're going to see it here, okay? But the important thing, and just don't mess with this. Don't change things in here, right? There's different things in there. You don't want to mess with that, okay? You want to leave that alone. You don't even have to have that. I'm just showing you that, okay? You can go back and keep that hidden. That's fine, okay? And that's way, one thing you got to be careful. You can't really just copy this from here to somewhere else and everything work. It needs to be in that same folder as that Git. If you have some problems with some of that stuff, things get a little hosed up, please contact me and I'll help you try to work through some of that. It's important to kind of really be careful with some things, though. You don't want to just start dropping things in directories. You don't want to get kind of crazy about stuff because no matter what you drop in there, it's going to want you to check it in. Right? And so just doing that, boom. You didn't have any content, just creating that. So you end up dropping a bunch of stuff in any of those directories, any of those local directories, so you just really want to be careful what you do. You need to manage that because it's going to come up here. And sometimes you get to a certain, accidentally do something, all of a sudden you're going to have hundreds of files or whatever, right? So things are there. Um, if you do something, either move it to somewhere else, or accident, or delete it. Well, once you delete it, you deleted it, right? But if it's something you accidentally have something you want to keep, you need to put that back somewhere, right? Get rid of that. But here I'm just going to delete that. You can go back to GitHub Desktop, and you'll notice it's already gone, right? So that's how that works. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick 10-minute break here. We're going to come back and look at like the first assignment, I guess. Okay, so here's chapter 1, labs and exercises. So like I said, originally I was going to put this under these exercise directory, but I think we'll use the data files. Hopefully that'll work out well. Instead of that, we're going to do that. If you already did this, if you already checked something in or whatever, that's fine. But going forward, might as well, for consistency's sake, try to use that data files directory. This all comes with the book. This data file, all these data files. So in the Cengage book, if you go to so each chapter, which is actually each module. So if you open up each module, for this one, this is going to be chapter 1 module. So when you open up there, you go down here to the different assignments. There's the apply, extend, analyze. Okay. And so if you go to apply here, that'll open here, over here on this side. Do want to mention, so when I came up with these page numbers, I came up with this. I also have a hard copy of the book. Okay. Now you should, if you want a hard copy, I believe that, when you log as a student, it might have an opportunity for you to rent a book or that. That's what I was told. So if you have any questions about that, please let me know. I'll see if I can help you with that. Kind of a little different from my version, my instructor version, but I do have a hard copy. And when I went through these pages, these are the pages that are in my hard copy. But I did kind of notice when I'm looking at this book here, if I go down here on page 40, so you might have to this may be off a little bit. Okay, so basically in my book here, where it has apply knowledge, it says page 40. So you're just going to, probably just be cognizant of that and just, make sure that you're even, see, it's got page 40 here, but, if I go look in my hard copy book, it's page 38 for this assignment. So it all kind of depends. Just something to keep in mind. Okay. So basically, I'm going to follow through on this. So let me, so the next thing is we want to use our Visual Studio Code editor, right? So let's go ahead and look how we can do that. So I'm going to go to my coursework here, and under Data Files, Chapter 1, you can actually open things up at certain folder levels. It all depends what you want to do, okay? Now, if you want to make sure, if you want to open everything in chapter 1, you could do that, okay? And here, maybe it depends on how your installation went on Visual Studio Code, but show more options. I actually have one that's open with code, okay? So I can just click this and open with code. So I'm going to open up here this whole chapter 1. These are all the chapter 1. And I suggest you probably try to do something either individually each part, or you can open up all of chapter 1 is fine. But I would not open up like the folder at this top level. I would not do, just because just more room for you to put something in the wrong directory. All right. But you know that if you're very careful, that's fine, right? But it's just easy to accidentally get into here and you're doing the wrong one, okay? And even that, you know, whatever's best, you know, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Sometimes you may just actually want to do it this way, okay? Show more options. And here you're just opening up this one directory structure. You can do all your work. All right. And one thing I do suggest, don't wait until you have all your code before you push that code out to the GitHub repository. You know, get done with an assignment, submit it. You know, the last thing you really want to do is have a whole bunch of stuff just sitting on your computer. You know, something happens, you forget to check it in, or some emergency happens, your car breaks down, you know, you don't get things in by Sunday night, you know, all kinds of different scenarios there, right? So, you know, if you're constantly checking in, then it's going to, you know, is a huge benefit there, you know, to prevent not being, you know, having things turned in late or being marked as absent for the week, right? And then in addition to that, you know, sometimes, you know, people do have problems with their computers. People have crashes. All of a sudden something happens, or, you know, the computer dropped, you know, broke, you know, all kinds of different scenarios there as well, right? And so if you're constantly checking in your code, then at least you have that there. That's the benefit of that, right? And it's really important. And, you know, you go get a job somewhere, you know, that's important. And it's okay, even if it's not finished, check it in. You can check things in at any time. Just because it's not working, don't mean you can't check it in. Okay, I'm not going to be checking that all week long to see, you know, what that looks like, right? I'm not going to be worrying about it probably until after it's been completed, right? Until after the deadline date, right? So if you know, it's fine to check things in even if it's not working, right? It's a smart thing to do, actually. But, you know, here I'm just opening up the one directory structure there, the one folder. Now, for some reason, if you don't have this option to do this, another thing you can do, right, is, you know, as long as you know where your stuff is, I think we'll just go ahead and do chapter 1s. So I like to come up here and copy things like that, right? You just copy that. And I'm just highlighting that, and I'm hitting the Control-C key, Control-C for copy, all right? And then you can come over here in Visual Studio Code and just bring up Visual Studio Code separately, right? Usually go here, maybe I can do it over here. No, you can let me do that. All right. So you can just go and open up Visual Studio Code if you get maybe a shortcut on your desktop or wherever. Oh, that's the wrong one. This is the one I said that if you're a C# student, you don't want to be using this. You want to be using Visual Studio Code instead. All right. So it will open to the last thing you did, which is always good. All right. But sometimes you need to open up other folders, so you can always go File, Open Folder, right? And then, you know, you can navigate to where that folder was, and actually it's by default, it is navigating to that, right? So that's fine. So this is everything for chapter 1, and it's up to you how you want to handle this. But I don't know if it's a good idea to do these labs in here, and I'll tell you why. Because if one keeps on building on the other, I don't think we want to do that. We want to kind of keep on updating the same one, and you don't have to want to keep copying things over from one directory to another. Let me look into that a little bit more, but I think that we really want to use that other directory. That's a lab directory. But here we've got our apply, analyze, extend, right? We want to do that. You did want to mention that there's a couple different assignments that are group assignments. We're not going to be doing those. I'd like to do some things with the group. Maybe we could break into some at some point. Still have to think through that. Just kind of really of a challenge with an online course. People have different schedules. Some people work during the day. It kind of gets hard. It's different when you're in a classroom. Easier to do that stuff. Make sure on your assignments, when it ever talks about a group thing, we're not doing the group ones, okay? And on those each of those assignment sheets, it doesn't mention those, okay? Okay, so back to here. Now we're at apply. Now, remember how I kind of talked about, to create a folder, you have to have something in there. This is the same thing the publishers did with their data files, right? They've got some of these empty files just so they can have the directory structure there. But in this file, in the directory, we have the apply one. So let me get this set up so we can look at the book at the same time. Okay, real quick here though, I want to go over Visual Studio Code, just a few things in here. So I got chapter 1 open here for the assignments. Sometimes you need a little more room or whatever. It kind of just depends on how things are set up here for you. But if you want to, if this is taking up too much room for you, you can always click on this to make it small, to minimize it over here, to collapse it. And then you expand it just by clicking right up here on the left-hand side, Explore window, right? Then obviously you come down here and you've got your extensions, right? You've got your extensions down here. One of the important ones is live server. We're going to be using that live server a lot. So make sure you have that one. The other ones that were part of the setting up your environment, but just kind of want to mention the live server one. So there's our Explore. We can minimize it. Then over here on the right-hand side, sometimes you've got this other stuff over here. If you come up here at the very top and you can click on this will go ahead and get rid of that. It kind of makes things a little nicer so you don't have things kind of catching your eye on the other side, and gives you a little more room here, okay? Another function here is this autosave. So by default, it's not going to be selected. So when usually a lot of times, just out of habit, from my experience as an editors, a lot of earlier editors and that didn't have like autosave and stuff like that. So usually I would make a change to something. I hit Control S to save it. Hold the Control key down, hit S to save it. Or you can come up here and do File Save, right? Which is Control S right there, holding the Control S. So you can do that File Save or that. But if you just want everything always saved automatically, then you can go ahead and come up here to File and click Autosave. So that way, anytime you change anything, it's automatically going to save. Okay. All right. And it's going to take a while to learn how to use all these different things. Right. All right. So let's go ahead and put that back up here. All right. So here's our Open Your Text Editor. So we decided we're going to go ahead and use those data file directories. Hopefully that works. And like I said, for some reason, if you've got it in somewhere else, might as well follow this. It makes life a lot easier and less confusion. So let's just go ahead and use those data file ones. And then, so the first thing is you're wanting to create as a feature to save with the name index.to create a web page. So use the file save as a feature. Okay. Open your text editor. So currently in the apply thing, we don't have anything. So you can come in here, you got apply. If you come up here, two different ways to do this. Okay. You can come up here and click new file, or you can right click on here and do new file. Okay. Either way. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and go new file here. And we're going to do index.html. All right. And then from there, it's telling us to add, let me make this smaller. So once you got this, especially for me, when I'm doing sharing stuff, and you know, maybe this is something you're doing where you're working on one screen and you got things side by side. That's a good benefit of minimalizing this, collapsing this, right? So you have a little more room here, right? Okay, so at the beginning of your HTML document, so, and actually I'm kind of wondering if I accidentally put a comma. Look what got to be careful of this. Like I put a comma in there instead of period. And it's especially if you have those extensions. So this extension works with the HTML. That's why you see that color there. You see that little icon. It's because it's an HTML. I actually had a comma in there. Things like that happen, right? So you got to really watch that. Helps if I do that right, huh? All right. So first line here is what's called a document type declaration, right? And so what this does is it tells the browser this document is an HTML5 document. I know there's nothing in here that says 5, but this is what they this is kind of the base standard nowadays for the web. And over the years, they've really worked on, organizations worked on these specifications and so forth, so that everybody follows it. And so this is kind of basically the instruction to tell the browser, hey, this is an HTML5 document. Because if you don't do things like this, it will impact how the browser handles things. Okay, so it's very important, especially nowadays. Everything we're going to be doing is going to be HTML5. Everything is older. Most people don't even do older stuff. The only time the older stuff is relevant is you got some stuff that somebody created a long time ago and they have never updated it. But you do anything new, you're always going to be using the latest version. Okay. And so you want to use this kind of doc type to say this is an HTML5 document. Okay. So then what's this saying? So all required HTML documents create a basic web page, including the doc type, HTML. All right. So then we've got the HTML one, right, where we've got it like this. Okay. And go ahead and put this. We always have to remember that we're going to end this one, right? So we're going to have multiple. This is the enclosure where this is always going to be at the end of your document, right? You can't have other things after this. Begin and end HTML. The begin needs to be right after your doc type, and the end needs to be at the very bottom of your document, right? And put everything else in between. Okay, so then what else are we going to have? We're going to have some other things. Let's see, we have HTML. We're going to have a head tag as well. Okay, we're going to have a head tag. And same thing there. So, and then inside our head tag, what are we going to do? We're going to do a title tag, right? We're going to do a title tag in there. That's where we put our head. Title tag is what gets put, will be viewed within the tab of a browser. We'll see that here in a minute. Okay, there's your title tag. And then also we have what's called meta tag. Is a meta tag as well, meta, okay? And I'll show you this. And this is kind of the standard meta tag default that you use. Okay, and I'll explain what this means. We don't need all this over here anymore. Okay. So this meta tag with the char set, which is character set, UTF-8, right, it's actually a crucial piece of code that defines the character encoding for the HTML document. Okay, and you always place that within the head section. As far as character encoding explained, character encoding, a system that translates the characters you see on the screen, like letters, numbers, and symbols, into a set of numbers that the computer can store and process. Okay, you have to remember with like computers, everything is you know is the way computers work internally. They don't understand human type stuff, right? Um, they understand machine code, right? So the way that character encoding works is basically going to take things that you know as a human that you understand, and it's going to kind of convert that into something the computer can deal with, right? And can store and process, right? So without specifying a character encoding, the browser will kind of try to guess what you're doing by looking at your page real quick, and it may do the wrong one. So UTF-8 is actually a universal character encoding that could represent virtually any character from any language in the world, including all characters from what's called the standard ASCII set, as well as, and we'll talk about that more later, as well as international letters, emojis, special symbols, and it's the most common one used. Okay, so basically, what you're doing is you're explicitly telling the browser, hey, use each UTF-8 to display the content on the page, and and it will prevent some issues that garbled text and so forth, and it works regardless of what the language is. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but that's just a quick overview there on that. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and create a body tag. Right? Create a body tag here. And then once again, so you want to make sure that you always end your head before you start your body. So your head element, all the stuff in your head element is never really displayed. It's not displayed on your page. Okay, it's never displayed on your page. It's kind of just special type information, right? It has a title. It's got the metadata. Meta means data about data. So basically saying, hey, this is my character set. This is what I'm using, right? This is kind of works with the browser, right? It's not anything that the human, a user is going to really care about, right? Or understand. So here's your body tag. And so you want pretty much, keep everything within your body tag for the most part. So you'll also, for this assignment, we're going to have kind of like a bunch of P tags, right? So there's a P tag. We're going to do a few of those, I think. So we don't have to do it this way. You can do it when you get there, but just kind of, so we got some P tags and stuff like that, right? All right. So we already added our language, English. Okay, add the character set. We added our character set. And then add the text in our title. Okay, so we're going to add this text in our title here. And now we at least have something to display on our page. So I'm going to go ahead and just for fun here, so we should see this in our browser thing. We won't have any other content on the page. So if I right click in here, this is why we used that extension live server. So if I right click in here and do open with live server down here, or you can do Alt L, Alt O. A lot easier, just right click and do open with live server. And so there you go. And as you can see, there's no content, but if you look up here at the top here, there's your title, right? Your title is going to be in your browser, okay? Put that back over there. Get back to where we were. All right. Okay, and now we're also in one of our P tags here. We're going to pretty much put the same thing almost here, right? Let's see. So we'll put that right here. And clean things up a little bit. Get that P tag aligned a little bit. Okay. And then what else? Below the first, add another paragraph, including your name and today's date. What is today's date? The 26th. Okay. Don't really need all those spaces. Sometimes this, some of these extensions and, just by default, a lot of times it'll underline words. And the reason is, this ain't really an error. It's just kind of warning, hey, this is unknown word. Well, that's my name, right? So that kind of happens. You just ignore that, right? Just one of those things. Kind of, it's there to kind of help you make sure that, if you have things misspelled and stuff, you can catch that. But, there's the downside is that, sometimes it's going to do that on things you don't really want it to do that on, right? So then we did that. And then below the second paragraph, add a thematic break, right? Which is a HR tag, horizontal rule. HR is horizontal rule. So we're just going to do that. And then we're going to do this tag, okay? Let's just, every once in a while you can, let's see. You can just go ahead and take a look. And like I said, if you've got this set up to do auto save, you should be good. So I'm just going to right and click. Let's go take a look at it. You can do it multiple times, right? Open with live server. There you go. And there's your horizontal rule, right? There's your two different paragraphs. We already looked at our title. There's your horizontal rule, okay? And as you progress, we're going to be adding other things. We get into chapter 4, we'll add style sheets. So they'll have a lot of styling in there, right? So this is just the beginning parts. So, okay, we got a horizontal rule. And then below that, we're going to add another paragraph element that states the name of the text editor you are using. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and do this. One thing to realize. So it doesn't matter how many spaces you have. You don't want to do this, right? You want your code to be cleaner, but I'm just wanting to show that it doesn't matter. It's not like it's going to put a bunch of spaces in between here and that. So let's just go look at it real quick. As you can see, it ignores white space. Basically ignores white space. You have to handle it different ways by using breaks, breaks ain't really that best thing to do either. But there's other ways to do that that you'll learn as well. But this is not how we want to do that, right? You want to keep your code, together and readable, okay? But my whole point was really just to show you that white space does not matter. It ignores white space. All right. All right. Let's see what's next here. How to plan the website, right? It states the name of your editor. We did that, which we were using Visual Studio Code. Another includes how to plan a website. I just have a little, you can go grab something somewhere, if you want. You can cut and paste something from somewhere, or you can type it in. That's up to you. Let's make time easier. Here's mine. That's my third paragraph. Actually, it's probably more than that. Third real paragraph. We'll also put some other stuff in the paragraph tag, but that's okay. Let's see. Well, maybe they are right. No, they're wrong. Okay. Below the fourth paragraph element, add another paragraph element that includes one or two sentences about what you learned. So what did you learn? And hopefully, I'm hoping that you've learned a bunch of things. Do I have a tag that isn't automatically done? I guess not. So it's always nice to kind of clean up things. Some things you might want some spaces for readability, other times you don't. Some of that's personal preferences. It's always good for indentation and stuff though too. Especially when you got things like this, you kind of really might be best to give a little space so you can kind of see things that are a little more. Okay. So there you go. I'm going to save this. I do have, and some of these extensions will kind of reformat your code as well. So mine's probably set up a little differently. We can talk about that later though. So here we go. Here's our page. We don't have any errors in here. Let me see if I can create. Let's see what happens there. I'm trying to create something. One thing is that it's very forgiving. The browser is very forgiving. Okay, the browser is very forgiving, and even if you have some things wrong, it will still display it. But sometimes it won't, and it depends on the scenario. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. All right, so that was that assignment, index.html. So now we've got an index.html file, and this is what I suggest you do when you complete an assignment. What I suggest you do is go ahead and commit your code. I wouldn't wait until you do everything, right? Bad idea. And especially because you can have some things that are working, all of a sudden you started copying some stuff or you did something, and before you know it, and you got a big problem and you're having problems committing any of your code. So, take things in chunks. You complete something, check it in. And like I said, even let's just say, hey, this is a Thursday, and I'm busy all Friday. I'm going to get back to something. I'm going to finish up my stuff on Saturday. Whatever, right? Sometimes, why let it just sit here? Check it in, right? Check it in. You can come back and you make your changes. Check it in again, right? It's always good to check things in as much as possible. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let me go ahead and bring up GitHub Desktop. And as you can see, we've got this file that was updated, and this is our one here. Yep. So created that. Commit chapter 1 apply. Whatever, right? You can put whatever you want here. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and click commit one file to main. Okay. And something else you're going to have to do, even though you committed it, looks like everything's gone from here. It actually has not been pushed to that GitHub repository. You have to click push origin. Okay, you always have to push. That's not enough. So it's easy, probably, this is, very much a big beginner mistake. You committed it, you're good, you think everything's fine. And also it's kind of always a good habit to get in a good habit of going to check to see. Let me pull up something here. I think I got things moved on a different page. But actually we can do it right within here. view GitHub, view on GitHub. Open up that in the browser, and as you can, whenever you see something, you'll see that message when some gets pushed. You'll see that little comment that you put. You'll see that. You can see this was just created 3 days ago. This is when I created mine. This is your original initial commit, right? That's what you'll see on initial commit until you start checking something in. So let's just go ahead and move this over here for right now. Actually, we can do it this. Well, I can't do desktop. GitHub Desktop won't let me have something, you know how I can do something next to each other. It won't let me do that. So we're going to just go ahead and click push origin. Now it's done. Now, if I go ahead and click view on GitHub, come back here, there you go. Commit chapter 1 apply. So if I go in here, you can, and you'll see where it was, right? Oh, it's in my data files, chapter 1, right? Apply, you know, it's going to tell you exactly the directory. There's your new file right here. And there's that message, okay? So basically that's what you do. Then I'm going to come in, I'm going to grade this, make sure that you, okay, well, based on this, I can just kind of go ahead and show you a little bit on that. I think I mentioned this before, but we do have a let me grab make sure I don't show student stuff here by accident. All right. So when this thing's ready to go, I come in here. Here's the different students. Not really what I want to go look at here. This ain't going to be what you're going to see. But this is how it's basically going to get graded. So here's your apply your knowledge. That was the first one, apply, right? Then extend, analyze. So for this one, you can get up to no issues. You do everything right, you can get 10 points. If you have 1 or 2 little minor issues, you can get 8 points. Now, obviously, these first assignments, you know, most people who are going to do them, you know, they're going to get pretty much all the points, or, you know, they might have a little something wrong, or they just didn't really do it at all, right? But when some assignments get a little more complex, these different things will come into play a lot more because you'll have a lot more going on your page, a lot more opportunities for, you know, multiple different, you know, possible issues, so to speak, right? But this is what I do, and I'll come in here and I select which one. This won't let me do that now, but when that grading time comes, then I will select which one you did for each assignment, okay? And you'll be able to come back in and view what was graded and what your score is. All right, so that's that. So let's do one more assignment. What's the next one, I guess? What, extend? Does it extend after apply in the book? Let's just go see what's in the book. Okay, so this extend one here, it's telling you to go to this standards thing, open in a new tab. All right, what's it asking you to do from there? Above the introduction, here, let me just make this big for right now. Above the introduction, select the link how to meet. Okay, how to meet. Okay, it's right here. All right, so we have these different ones. All right, so then we're going to do a little bit of cutting and pasting here. So you can go ahead and follow that. All right, so we're going to review the principles, open your text editor, enter all required HTML elements. I'm going to kind of go through this a little quicker here. Let me get rid of this. All right, let's get this cleaned up here. All right. So now on extend, we're going to want to do what? We're going to do the same thing as far as files. Okay. I'm going to go through this pretty quick here though. So once I get started here. So new file, and I'm going to do index.html. We did a comma earlier. Now we got that file. And then we're going to go ahead and kind of do all the same things we did before, right? So I'm going to add the let's do that. So here's our doc type. We talked about that. Our base HTML. Obviously, you want to end your body tag and end your HTML tag. All depends on, you know, I'm cutting and pasting, but you know, if you actually create it, it'll do it on its own. So there's that. And okay, and then basically we're, you know, pretty basic stuff here that we kind of already did before. You're doing almost the same thing over and over again. Probably the thing that this assignment started doing is kind of wants you to read some of those guidelines, right? So here's my body tag, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. All the same stuff here. Just got 4 paragraphs. These guidelines. Okay, so here's these different guidelines. One 3 and then 1 4. And so you can just copy those if you want. Actually, I kind of have some. These might be a little older though. So I'm going to just go ahead and drop this in here. So here's the, you just do your P tags just like you did before on the apply assignment, and doing one for each guideline. And that's pretty much it. Should be, once you kind of get going on that, get past that very first assignment, these other ones should be, you know, even though it kind of looks like a lot of work, it shouldn't be, you know, too bad. So just remember, if you don't have this set to autosave, you need to either come in here and do a file.save, or the other option is use the control key, hold the control key down, hit S, save it, okay? So here's this one. The thing is to be careful about making sure you've got stuff in the right directories, right? So apply, there's a one for apply, there's the one for extend. Just something you got to get used to, kind of really taking your time looking where you're at. Now if we go back to GitHub Desktop, here's our new file for extend. This is why, you know, it's a good idea you get this stuff so you don't have a bunch of stuff in here. The more stuff you have, you know, the more just puts you in a position where you could have some issues, right? Get confused in that. So what do we use on the, let me see what I use for the comment. All right, so I'm going to do commit chapter 2, just call this extend. You can do whatever you want here. Just a good idea to kind of label it something that's relevant to what you have. It just makes things easier to follow in that, less confusion. So basically, once again, you put the comment in there. And remember, this is always going to apply to everything. If for some reason you have couple things in here you don't want, you can uncheck those things, right? You can uncheck, it won't check something again. If you have a few things, right? So I don't want to check this in yet. You can always just choose what you want to check in. But like I said, I wouldn't get I wouldn't get too much stuff in your list. Just kind of causes some confusion. Okay. So go ahead and do that. And then you come down here at the bottom of this, commit one file to main. Come back up here, push origin. And from there, you can go ahead. You should get in the habit of really viewing this. It won't be, students in the past have said, oh, I did my work, but I forgot to push it. Well, that's unfortunately, we have to have some rules in place, and so you have to have that stuff pushed. So now you've got this new one here. So it will put it on, depends on what directory you're in. It's always going to put the latest one on the parent directory. So that was a parent directory. That's a parent directory, right? Chapter 1's a parent directory, but now you come down here, apply has the apply one, extend has the extend one, okay? So there you go. So you can do that, and that'd be like follow that through. That'll be your first 2 assignments, all right? That'll be your first 2 assignments plus your written test. So that's all I'm going to kind of cover here. Please let me know if you have any questions. Go ahead and try to put that stuff in that data files directory instead of what I kind of originally had. I'll change the assignments on that. Also, kind of keep in mind any assignments that talk about group stuff, working in a group. We're not doing those, okay? And there's I think one on the your turn. One of them's lab 3, and the other one's your turn, I think. So keep that in mind. Okay, we might have to make some little adjustments of how we're doing some things here as we go, since it's a new book, new curriculum. So, but we'll work together. I'll work with you, and I'm pretty easygoing in some ways. So, we'll work through it. So that's all I have for that. I'm also going to go ahead and I'm actually just going to create a separate video on the lecture 2 lab or chapter 2 lecture. Excuse me. On the chapter 2 lecture, I'm going to create a separate video on that. So let me know if you have any questions, and have a good day.